Hi, I'm Hayley and this is Susan, and welcome to Cancer Research Demystified. Today we're going to talk about, well, just cancer.
So thanks to research, the UK's cancer survival has now doubled over the last 40 years, and half of people are actually expected to survive the disease past the 10-year point. But as this improved healthcare and longer life expectancy continues, it does actually mean that the number of cases of cancer are still on the rise.
Yeah, there's actually some new research, relatively new, that shows that if you were born after the early 1960s, you actually have a 1 in 2 chance of getting cancer in your lifetime.
So what is cancer? In this episode we'll try to explain, and to do that first we'll have to understand what is a cell. So Hayley, what's a cell?
So a cell is the basic structural, functional and biological unit of all living organisms. It's actually the smallest unit of life you can get. Sometimes they're called the building blocks of life.
Right. And we just learned that the word comes from the Latin cella, which means, can you remember?
Small room! Okay, so a cell is the smallest unit of life. How many cells do we think we've got in a human body on average? Guess in the comments, no cheating. Okay, so there's a recent study that guesses about 37 trillion, and that's a lot of zeros. And there's also probably a similar amount of microorganisms associated inside and outside our body as well.
Yeah, so when we said small, we meant really small. Yeah. And there's about 200 different types of those cells, so they're not all the same thing. They actually perform a staggering variety of different functions.
So these small units of life are actually organised in the body in groups, and we call those groups tissues. That group is a group of similar cells and all the sort of surrounding material around them, and together they carry out one specific function.
And for you guys, we found out what that word means as well. It's from the French verb meaning to weave. So it's like these cells are woven together to form a functional tissue.
Which actually, under the microscope, that's not a really bad description. So there's a video about what cells look like under the microscope. I think it's a tissues video, and we'll link to that in the description.
Okay, so the next level up, once you've got these groups of tissues together forming like a functional unit, that's your organs. So your organs are like your lungs, your kidneys, you know what an organ is.
So in your body, your cells can get old, they can get damaged, so they need to be replaced. Also, as you grow, you'll need more cells. So to get more cells, our cells are really clever, and they do this by copying themselves. And this is a really normal part of things. It's a normal part of your bodily process, and it's very carefully controlled in your normal state of being.
Right. And in the same way, when these cells are damaged, our body also needs a carefully controlled way of disposing of those old cells. So they either send out signals or kind of get labeled for destruction by the body, but it's not as scary as it sounds. It's totally normal. That's what our body does all the time. So this copying and destructing of old damaged cells is normal. That's our everyday life.
Okay, back to cancer. So, Susan, big question, what is cancer?
Okay, so cancer is not just one disease, it's the name given to a collection of diseases where these everyday processes have gone wrong. So the cells can either keep copying themselves, maybe they're able to avoid the body from destructing them. They're also able to invade and spread throughout the body.
So these cancer cells have become very different from the normal cells they once were. They're also very different from the tissues that surround them.
So cancer cells differ from normal cells in lots of ways. Firstly, they're less specialised, so normal cells kind of perform a special function within their own tissue, but cancer cells may have lost this.
Yeah, they can also ignore signals from your body. So signals like stop dividing, die, be destroyed.
Right. As we alluded to, they also have the ability to start to spread throughout the body.
And they can actually influence the tissue they're in and the surrounding tissue, so things like the blood vessels or their immune system or sort of all the other cells around them.
So often we actually start to realise that a person has cancer because of some of these effects. So the way that the cells are acting a little bit differently means the organ isn't functioning quite right, and we start to see some symptoms.
So as well as maybe picking up cancer through the symptoms, as Susan described, we might find a lump. And the lump is actually those cancer cells that are copying. There's loads of them in a really small, tightly packed area. and you can feel them as a hard lump. But not all cancers will form these lumps. But also, in the same vein, not all lumps are cancers.
Right, so these lumps, we also call them tumours, and they can be either benign or cancerous. The benign kind are still cells that are growing kind of too much. They're keeping copying themselves and forming this lump or tumour, but they're not going to invade, they're not going to spread around the body.
They're not going to change the tissue function and cause organ failures or anything like that.
Yeah, and even though they have the word tumour, which is a bit scary, they're not actually that scary. So, for example, moles are a type of tumour. The other type of tumour is what we worry about. So those are the cancerous kind that we've mentioned, where they can grow and spread and go to other parts of the body and cause trouble.
Yeah, so a term that you might hear in that respect is malignant tumour, which is the opposite of that benign tumour. So it means it has the potential to spread and it is cancerous.
So how do we tell the difference?
Okay, so this is always done under a microscope. So as we said, we can see these changes. The cells look different. They change how they act. They change the tissue around them. So we take a sample of that lump and we'll put it under the microscope and we'll be able to tell you, hopefully, if it's benign or cancerous.
I'm not sure I could, but like your pathologist,
could. Okay, so like we said, cancer isn't one disease. It's kind of a dysregulation of cells within your own body. So everybody's cancer is very different. No cancers are identical. And the difference between these cancers and if they spread, if they don't, how aggressive they are, how they affect your tissues, all of that is controlled by their genetics. And we're going to go into that in a different video, so keep an eye out for that one.
Right, so that's it for this video. If you have any questions or comments on what is cancer, leave them in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please hit subscribe, and actually we have a brand new Instagram account. So if you'd like to see some pictures of a day in the life of a cancer researcher, you can find us on Instagram at Cancer Research Demystified. That's all for now. Bye.
Bye.